Good morning. Well, we keep looking at these Old Testament characters, and we keep looking to hear the promises that God was making about the coming of Mashiach. Yes, he'd promised Abram that through him, all the nations of the world would be blessed. That's you and me and all the Gentile nations. It is through the seed of Abraham that this was going to come about. And then Abraham going to God and saying, well, I've got Ishmael, my son. And God saying, no, I'm going to bless Ishmael. I'm really going to bless him. And he's going to become mighty nations. And if you look at the Arab nations of the moment, you'll find that God has truly blessed them in many ways. But he says, it is through Isaac that I'm going to give the blessing. God making his decision, his selection. And then through Isaac has two sons. And as we look at those sons, probably you and I looking at them and saying, oh, of course, the one that God is going to choose is going to be this strong man, Esau, the hunter, the one who could go out, make decisions, gather his own food. But God says, no, I'm going to choose Jacob. Why Jacob? Jacob was known to be a man who was full of guile. He seems very often to be a very weak character. And yet God says, no, it is through Jacob. I'm deciding for something which you don't understand. This is, in a sense, God playing a sort of game of chess with us. The chess master looking at the board sees multiple moves ahead and decides on a move that he is going to make, which is going to bring about the final conclusion. And for some reason, God looked at these two, Esau and Jacob, and says, it is Jacob who is going to be the one I'm going to bless. Because through him, the Mashiach will come, and through him, my plan can be fulfilled. Again, Esau is greatly blessed by God. God doesn't sort of put these people aside. He truly blesses them. But the seed line comes, in fact, through Jacob. We, looking at these characters, Esau and Jacob, would probably not have chosen Jacob, but God does. This is the one he wants. And then through Jacob himself, at the end of his life down in Egypt, he calls together his sons, and he says to them, God is going to prophesy over you, and he speaks to them quite clearly about the future they're going to have. And when he comes to Judah, it is this son, he says, the scepter, the power will come through this particular son. It is through Judah. The others are also going to be blessed, but the actual rule is going to come through Judah. So the message goes on from one generation to another. And the promise is there, lighting up people's lives, telling them about a future which had not come about. They waited for it throughout the generations. Things got better for them, things went worse for them. Sometimes things seemed to be impossible, but somehow this promise was continuing right the way down throughout the generations. Later, we come to the great kings, and through the kings we come to this man, David, a shepherd boy, just looking after the sheep. When Samuel went to Jesse's house, because he'd been sent there by God to choose a king for Israel, he sees all these sons coming before him. And again, Samuel, using his own understanding, sees these big, strong, healthy men that Jesse has as sons. And he says to himself, this must be the one. And God says, no, don't look on his appearance. Don't look on his strength. Don't look on anything except that I have pointed out the person that I want to be king. And he gets to the end of the sons of this meeting, and he turns to Jesse and he says, God hasn't chosen any of these. Don't you have any other sons? And he says, well, we've got the youngest. He's out looking after the sheep. And Samuel says, bring him in. Let's see this one as well. So they send for him. They say, come on quickly. Give up that job you got looking after the sheep. Come in a moment. Jesse wants you at home for the feast. And he says, yes, come on. We got a feast going on. And he's brought in, and he's brought into the company. And God says, this one. And I expect Samuel thought, why this one? Why not one of the older ones? Why not one of these big strong ones? Why not one of these who has obviously got all the abilities to be a king? And God says, no, this is the one. See, God's choice is not always our choice. That's what I want to point out. God's choice is not always our choice. But it's this young David that he chose. And later on, of course, going down to the battle lines where his older brothers were all standing back, terrified by Goliath, it is David that God moves upon to stand up. This young boy who goes out against this particular warrior giant, not with a sword and not with armor, but with a simple sling, and defeats the Philistine armies and becomes this great leader of Israel. And then later on, of course, king. And then God says through him, through your line, I'm going to give you a descendant whose kingdom will never, ever be taken away. The promises are being fulfilled generation after generation. Amen.